Hello folks, today I'll give you a lecture on NAT gateway. So what is a NAT gateway? A NAT gateway lets the Google virtual machine instance without an external IP address or a Google Kubernetes engine cluster, a private one, send outbound packets to the internet and receive corresponding inbound packets. So what that means is a virtual machine can either install or update a patch if in case that particular virtual machine doesn't have an external IP address. So let's look at it diagrammatically. So here I have a virtual machine in Asia East 1 and it's trying to connect to a IP address over the internet. So to make this work, what I have to do is I have to connect it to a NAT gateway. So a NAT has a corresponding external IP address associated with it as well as ports per instance. What that means is that for each instance, for each virtual machine that's connected to that NAT, set of 64 ports would be allocated to it. So to make this work, let's see how the flow is. So initially what happens is the virtual machine will send a set of attributes to the NAT gateway. So what it sends is the source IP address, which is basically the IP address of the virtual machine, the private IP address, the source port, which is chosen by the virtual machine operating system itself. The destination address is basically the address to which it's trying to communicate. The destination port is 80 and the protocol is TCP. So after this particular packet reaches the NAT gateway, what the NAT gateway does is it does a source network address translation. So what it does is it basically changes the source IP address and the source port. The source IP address changes to the IP address of the NAT, and the source port is one of the 64 ports that is assigned to that particular virtual machine. The rest remain the same. So once that packet is sent to the IP address, to the external IP, and then when the IP returns back that set of information back to the NAT, so it returns basically the source IP, which is the IP address to which the virtual machine is trying to communicate. The source IP is 80. The destination address here is the destination of the NAT, the IP address of the NAT. The destination port is 34022 and the protocol is TCP. So here the destination port is basically the same port that was allocated to the virtual machine. It sends it back to the same port. So once that particular set of information is received by the NAT again does a destination network address translation where it changes the destination and the address from its IP address to the IP address of the virtual machine, the private virtual machine. So the destination address again goes back to 192.168.0.25 and the destination port is 25,000, which is the same as the port when the virtual machine was trying to connect to the NAT. So this is how the NAT works. So the NAT basically does two specific things. One is the source network address translation and the other is the destination network address translation. So let's look at a demo and see how this works practically. So I have two instances here, instance 1 and instance 2. They're both connected to the same network. However, they are within different subnets. So instance 1 is in Asia East 1 and instance 2 is in Asia East 2. So if I try to do an SSH, or if I try to ping, let's suppose google.com. You can see that it fails to communicate. So this is in Asia East 1 and the other one is in Asia East 2. So what I'll do is I'll create a NAT gateway for instance 1 for Asia East 1 region. So what I'll do is I'll go to my Cloud NAT. So the Cloud NAT is within the network services. So I'll click on Get Started. Here, let me give a name. So I choose the VPC network, and here is the important thing. You need to choose which region it belongs to. So I'll choose Asia East 1. This is where my instance 1 resides. Cloud router actually acts as a a control plane for your NAT gateway. So you just need to give a name here. So I'll just give this as router 1. And after that, you can choose whether you want all the subnets within that region to have access to the NAT gateway or just an individual one. So using this, you can choose that. So once everything is done, you can just click on create. I have chosen all the subnets to have access. So once that is done, let's go back to our instance and let's see if you are able to communicate. So you can see that the Asia East one is able to communicate with google.com. However, Asia East 2, which is basically another region, still isn't able to communicate. And that's how the NAT gateway works. If you have any doubts, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you.